Hi, welcome to another Expert Insights discussion. Today we're joined by two guests, Stephanie Smith, founder and digital matriarch at Cogwheel Marketing, and Jack Lindemuth, founder of JLL Commercial Strategy Consulting and partner at Strategic Solution Partners. In this discussion, we pick up on a recent case study Jack wrote following a consultation project with an independent four-star boutique property. Jack was brought in to figure out why the property's revenue struggled to improve despite investment from the owners. Through this project, Jack identified 7 key findings, let's call them commercial mistakes, that the property was making, and these points form the basis of this discussion. Stephanie joins us to bring her perspective of working with branded hotel chain properties to show how these mistakes can still be made within this property type. Really hope you enjoy the discussion. And if you like what we're doing, please subscribe to the channel, click that bell so you know when we have new content, and please don't forget a simple thumbs up. It really helps raise the profile of the channel, and in that way, you can help us help others. Anyway, hope you enjoy it. Roll the intro. Hi both, thanks for joining us today. Hope you are both well. Stephanie, how are you? You good?
Good, everything's great.
Excellent. And Jack, how are you?
I am well, thank you.
Excellent. Well, again, thank you for finding the time. Hopefully, we always say this is going to be an interesting discussion, but we really hope it is, and we'll lead into what that's going to be in a moment. But before we get into the topic, obviously, Stephanie, you've been with us before, but Jack, you're new to us. So maybe Stephanie, if you could just give us a refresher introduction for those who haven't seen some of our previous videos, and then Jack will come to you after.
Perfect. Thanks for having me, Trevor. So again, I'm Stephanie Smith with Cogwheel Marketing. I'm the founder and digital matriarch at Cogwheel Marketing. I'm also a partner at Cayuga Hospitality Consultants. But at Cogwheel Marketing, we focus on digital marketing for branded hotels. So really understanding the ecosphere and proprietary systems of Marriott, Hilton, and IHG, and then being able to couple that with additional systems and strategies of third-party platforms to help individual hotels, management companies, and ownership groups with their performance.
Perfect. Thank you. And Jack, if I could pass over to you.
Yeah, good morning, Trevor. Thanks for having me. My name is Jack Lindemuth, and I'm the founder of JLL Commercial Strategy Consulting, also a strategic partner with Strategic Solution Partners as well. But I specialize in maximizing total revenues as well as profits, specifically in independent luxury and lifestyle hotels and resorts. And Strategic Solution Partners is a premier consulting division for the industry, but as well in the task force area too.
Perfect. Thank you both. And that links us nicely in why we have you on here, Jack. As you indicated there, looking at independent properties. A lot of the time you're working with them and identified, and you said around that revenue optimization, looking at total revenue, and the particular what sparked the desire to get you guys together was based around a case study. Now, we're not referencing specifically who the hotel was, and we're not using that case study as a test case. It was more that what struck me when I read it was that you identified, going into this hotel, 7 key areas where they probably weren't where they needed to be at any time, and certainly probably not coming out as we come out of this pandemic. And so we thought it'd be useful to maybe not only look at what are those 7 areas that you identified, but then dig a bit behind it and think, what are things that we could be doing differently? And I think why we wanted to get Stephanie involved in this as well is because Jack's focus, as you said, is very much around the independents. Stephanie, you spend a lot of time working with brands, and it's looking at where that crossover can be in some of these aspects. So enough of the introduction. Let's kind of kick it off. So the first point that you identified, and I'm going to be reading from notes here, so if you see my eyes move around, forgive me. So the first point you identified was untapped revenue generating partnerships and distribution. Okay, sounds very straightforward and simple, but just give us an insight, Jack, if you can, as to what you identified and then where you think that can be enhanced and improved.
Sure. Yeah, this is definitely a big topic, and a key one within one of my most popular services is really an asset analysis and audit. And, at this point, I always approach it with an elevated, holistic, and creative approach. Especially, this needs to be taken at independent properties because they don't have the red tape the big brands do. Look at all levels of partnerships available with your OTAs, your consortias, your wholesalers, C-Event partnership in the group and event side. Your CRS platform plays into this. And there's also, I'll talk a little bit more on in a minute, is specialty third party, guest room, short-term rental, and event relationships, right? There's a whole plethora, and you don't have that red tape there. And also, you don't want to forget about your local CVB, right? Tourism partnership opportunities, as those can be great ways, especially for exposure on the leisure side, especially in this environment today.
Yeah,
but specializing in independent luxury and lifestyle hotels and resorts, as I do, an example of a few niche partners out there, it's going to be, for example, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, Tablet Hotels, VacayU, right? The short-term rental or alternative accommodation sector, it's been exploding, right? We've seen so many reports, hard stats and performance metrics, and a hot topic, Airbnb, right? Sonder, IPO, it's a very exciting and interesting space, but it's a space that I strongly recommend for independent hotels that can play both sides to capitalize on it. For example, I had a client last summer in a leisure destination market. We put them on Airbnb. We spent quite a bit of time merchandising the property's offerings, curating that message, descriptions for the type of audience. In this single channel alone, it generated about 10 to 14% of their totally monthly, guest room production within a few months. And the icing on the cake is it's the lowest commission partner out there.
Yeah, so that's the kicker that's worth knowing about, isn't it? What do you think? And from Stephanie, from your point of view, from a branded point, I'll come back. I've got another question to ask you in a minute on that moment, Jack. But Stephanie, from your point of view, from a branded perspective.
Yeah, so I think some of the same things apply. I know Jack mentioned maximizing your CVB. So this extends to your local CVB, but also looking at your state tourism site. So I'm in Colorado, so you have your Visit Colorado, but you also have your local chambers and things like that. A lot of these areas are really focusing on their destination marketing campaigns. So trying to get, looking at, as flights start to come back, where you can partner with your CVB and do destination marketing campaigns and kind of piggyback on what they're already doing. So that applies for one or the other, either independent or branded. But in the same vein, from a branded hotel standpoint, you want to be able to make sure, with the footprint that the big brands have, you want to make sure that you're maximizing that. So making sure if they're offering any brand specific promotions that you're taking advantage of those, loading those rate codes so that you can take advantage of their larger scale email marketing promotions that they're doing. Because as we all know, like if you're a Marriott hotel in any given market, there's a lot of other Marriotts you're competing with. So you have to make sure that even within your own brand that you stand out as an option and a place to stay. And I think the other point is the leisure destination packages. So leveraging those through your CVB, your state tourism website. It's sometimes we're looking at it more to leverage incremental exposure, even though the package may not be a huge production piece, but we're really trying to leverage that to get in front of that transient market that Jack was talking about that's actually traveling throughout the summer.
And that makes sense. And a question to kind of both of you. I don't sort of mind who answers first, but how do I phrase this? When I saw that heading, untapped revenue generating partnerships and distribution, it kind of surprised me that you still go into hotels and find that these things aren't being done. So I guess just a general comment, maybe a general observation. Are there barriers? Are there barriers outside of knowledge and understanding to actually achieving these things? Where is the friction?
I think a lot of it has to do with their staffing and the hierarchy of how hotel teams and strategy teams are or built. I know that a lot of that's changing, especially due to COVID, but having the, if the GM was previously in charge of that strategy and all things went up through that way, that might, as an operations hat, that might not be the best strategy. I know Jack probably has something to add to that.
Yeah, I definitely piggyback on Stephanie there. In the independent space, there's definitely some, talent struggles and really infrastructure. I don't want to go down a rabbit hole on, that whole evolution of commercial strategy and the silos. I feel it's sort of getting talked a little bit to death in the past several months. It deserves to. But another area, if I could, Trevor, in this topic to call out is for independent properties that have a true soft brand. I consistently come across, opportunities where they don't realize it takes a lot of work. You actually have to work that relationship. For example, Preferred Hotels and Resorts. I've worked with many properties, part of that group, awesome group, so many resources, but many times there's the mindset of, once we're plugged in, we're just plugged in and it just happens. And there's a lot of work that goes into that. They have great marketing programs, promotional campaigns, their consortia and travel agency connections are significant, and group connections. You have to work those resources to ultimately get the ROI on that partnership and drive exposure and revenues for the asset. But I wanted to call out that soft brand piece because I think it's a misunderstanding for some pure independent partners that they think if they just tap into that, it's this automatic, the floodgates come in with revenues, and there's still a lot of work that goes into that. You just now have the platform and you have to work it.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And in a lot of ways, it's probably a similar approach to how people have with the OTAs. Once I plug myself in, I don't have to think about it, let the bookings come in. But as you say, there's a slightly different approach needed there.
Exactly.
Okay. Anything else on the revenue generating partnerships and distribution, or should we move to point 2? We done with one? Yeah. Okay. So the second point that you identified in this case study was overlooked mapping and connectivity issues throughout the distribution ecosystem. Okay. So apart from me making it sound like a mouthful, just to explain that, what does that actually mean? Jack, do you want to take that?
Yeah, keeping that clean distribution system, it's another area. It takes experience and really understanding the nuances and the granular aspect of what's behind the scenes, right? What's under the hood. It's not as easy as many think. And, for example, one of the first things I do, I go in and do an analysis of all room types, availability, their rates, their descriptions, property information across all partnerships, including the GDS, which is scary to many, rightfully so. It was scary to me years ago. That's another world. But this sounds so basic, right? But I'm still surprised at how many properties I go into, and you find multiple room types that haven't been mapped or connected for months, or possibly even longer, or there's connectivity issues, parity issues because of a mapping piece. Wow. And it's all equating, of course, to lost revenues. And it's tedious, but another reason I'm calling this out is I specialize in, luxury lifestyle independent properties, and most of those, they're carrying 15 plus room types or specialty residences. So that just creates a much more complex distribution ecosphere because, when you're having 20 some room types, I actually have a client now, they have over 30 total. And the complexity on setting all of that up, it's a lot. So it's easy for a connectivity. It's like, I always explain, I think the easiest way, it's like having a race car. It's constant maintenance and you have to keep it primed. And the GDS piece, I mentioned that a second ago to a little bit deeper. It's a must, in my opinion, and experience, right? That HOD audit, right? Your hotel description and data. It's very granular, but it's critical to get that report, spend the time and truly go through and comb not just your regular property information, but also we're selling experiences in these upper upscale luxury lifestyle properties. It's not a commodity of just a basic room. So you want to lean into that and communicate that message the best you can that the system capabilities and character limitations will allow, not only in GDS, but through all your other partnerships, the OTAs, direct, et cetera. So it's a big piece that it's not glamorous, right? Many find it, very tedious and time consuming, but you really need to understand that distribution environment, because if it's not on point, it quickly relates to lost revenue.
No, that makes sense. And I guess from a branding point then, Stephanie, all of that point is irrelevant because they must be all on point with all of the information and everything buttoned up and sorted. I know I'm laughing, and you and I have spoken about this.
I mean, it is a misconception. A lot of people, a lot of owners, management companies think, oh, the brand's going to take care of that. The brand's going to, they do a lot of the heavy lifting with the mapping. I'm not going to not going to discount that. Every time I dabble in the independent space, I realize why I focus on brands. But, we actually recommend to our hotels as well to do your own HOD audits as well with the brands, because there's hundreds of fields in the back end CMS, whether it's PIM, whether it's Epic, that most hotels probably haven't looked at since pre-opening, and that could have been easily 10 years ago. So being able to take a fresh look at how it's distributed to the GDS is a great point. I think the other component is the content and imagery component. So no matter what type of hotel you are, the imagery and the storytelling piece of that, and how that's distributed to not only through your own website, but through your third-party channels is a big deal. So a lot of the big brands are going to use Yaxter, VFM, Leonardo, something like that to do the mass distribution, but then you still have to worry about your tagging and how you're associating each images with each specific room type. And additionally, with the distribution, you also need to look and say, do I want to distribute this room type to this channel? So depending on the volume of room types, you can still say, maybe I only have 2 of these suites. I don't want to sell that through OTAs. And during the pandemic, a lot of times we were like, we need to open up inventory for all of our room types, where previously we were being very selective about when we had smaller quantities of room types being sold in the OTAs. We decided to usually open up that inventory where before we had restricted it. So I think there's a lot of those, you're trying to make, an extra $10 here and $10 there. And if you can sell that premium room type through a third-party channel, then it might make sense for your hotel. So that's the type of analysis, people like Jack can help decide, but it applies on the brand side as well.
And just kind of looking at if there's some final points on point 2, obviously jump in, but it's interesting again that back to your comment on point 1 around the soft brand piece, plug it in and leave it. It kind of feels when I was listening to both of you talking there that I think, Stephanie, you said, once they've opened up and they've set it up, then it's left alone. There doesn't seem to be as if there's this let's go back and check and review and cross check and double check and however many checks. It's like, okay, well that's done, and then every time something new gets added, it bolts on, but there's not a sense of reflection. Is that oversimplifying it?
No, I mean, we just went through a hotel. They had a lot of new inventory come into the market. So we said, we need to reposition ourselves with it. We have an older product. So how can we reposition ourselves? So one of the basic things that we've had really successful is just renaming our room types to showcase the value proposition of that, the views, the better views or specific views or higher floor. So like little things like that, trying to, set ourselves apart from a newer build hotel that doesn't have the same offerings as our hotel.
And Jack, from an independent point of view, they're probably not sitting there relying on a brand or expecting the brand to do this. So I mean, am I wrong to think that they're better at checking these things? I mean, I would guess from this case study that this maybe isn't just a one-off, but I'm interested in how regular you might see this occurring, that lack of cross-checking.
I'm definitely finding more that has the opportunity than not. It's such an area of expertise typically, right? And you have these small ownership groups or these one-off owners. A lot of times they don't have someone with that level of detail or a specific experience. And if I could also add, especially with the pandemic, a lot of folks, which is great, are rethinking their technology. What's their total tech stack? So if you're doing a CRS transition, that's an excellent time to really clean house, get everything set up. But at the same time, many of the independents don't understand the legwork that takes. It's a massive undertaking. So it's just another piece I wanted to mention, that mapping connectivity piece of one, knowing your systems, having that resource, right? For example, if you are part of preferred hotels, reach out. They have dedicated specialists that know, for example, they use the Nexus across their properties. Really reach out and utilize those resources. If you're not familiar, you don't have the infrastructure. You know, I'm not encouraging or saying it's warranted to go hire a dedicated distribution expert just for that specific area. Hire a consultant part-time, do an audit, reach out to your partner like preferred.
I think it's an interesting point. I mean, you know, you're in this space day in, day out. So I think it's interesting that, as you say, it's the complexity behind it, and maybe that's where the friction exists. Maybe there's two elements to it. One is well, we've set it up, it's good to go, forget about it, and then the focus on running the property and giving the best guest experience, and that's where the focus and effort is. But then maybe, as you say, there may be another point of where they reflect back, look, do some evaluation, but then as you say, the amount of work or specialist work that's needed behind the scenes maybe adds a degree of difficulty where some external support could be utilized and valued in that case. No, that makes sense. Okay.
Right.
Point 3, poor and inconsistent content throughout the online storefront. Okay. Online storefront and then poor and inconsistent content. Who wants to take this one first? Stephanie, can you jump in on that one first, and then I'll pick up with you, Jack, second on this.
Yeah, I think it's I believe strongly in a book direct strategy, obviously, for your own website, but I think you need to be not only visible, but also accurate across whatever channel someone might come across your hotel. So they're always going to cross-reference. I think the new stat is people check 24 sites before they actually decide to make that conversion.
Wow.
So, you know, within the branded ecosphere, a lot of the big brands use Yext as a back-end platform that have an API with like top 40 sites from Google My Business, TripAdvisor, Foursquare, those type things. But I find that the systems don't always talk the same language. So going through and auditing, especially Google My Business, if you don't have time to audit Yelp or Bing Maps or Apple Maps, some of the important but maybe not as well used, I mean, at least get access to your own Google My Business account, making sure that your amenities are accurate. They're always changing the offerings in terms of how, throughout COVID, they were offering different, COVID-19 responder policies. They're always updating their safety and cleanliness guidelines so that when somebody does search for your hotel in the right-hand panel where your knowledge graph shows up, at least everything there is accurate in a snapshot. And then utilizing the review component there is another thing, but those local listings are pretty important to your consistency of content and imagery in your online storefront, as part of your online storefront.
And Jack, from your perspective, what do you see? I mean, it sounds to me as if that would apply to a brand or independent property, but there are other elements to that.
Right. On this topic, Trevor, I would say a big piece for me is parity isn't just for rates, right? You constantly hear rate parity, rate parity. It's for content too. Mm-hmm. And content parity, quality across all the channels, especially local, like Stephanie was just saying. It's another consistent area of opportunity I find within audits. And, I want to, give an example. I come across properties, luxury lifestyle properties, they overlook some of these, basic high traffic areas that it influences a customer's buying decision. Mm-hmm. So for example, I'll have a AAA 4-diamond property. I'll find they're listed as 3-diamond on Bing, or Expedia lumps them into a crowded 4-star category when they could actually be 4.5-star, right? And that list just goes on and on with the partnerships and how they're classified and how they're presented. And it also has a direct impact on the popular, value for price paid, guest survey piece. So that's a pretty deep area on the content side, but it's another quick, and as we have listed here as a top find on audits, especially in independence. And if I could add, I think this will tie into all the pieces we're hitting today. And I just thought of it when we were finishing the last question, is technology. For me, simplifying the complexities is technology. Technology is the driver behind a lot of this. And that's where really the independents are increasingly becoming more and more uncomfortable, especially ones that have been around for decades and have done things the same way for years and years with that old infrastructure. Technology is driving a lot of this forced change that needs to happen in mindset.
That's an interesting point around the technology piece, and I guess, you know, with the from the branded properties, the chains, you know, they provide technology, and there's people have different views on the strengths and weaknesses of what they do and how you can supplement it. But there is something there with the independent properties. You know, they do have to stand on their own. They've got to work it out, or they engage somebody to help them. But there is, you kind of feel that that gap is potentially widening quite significantly. And I read something the other day that 69% of all the new hotels that are in the pipeline to open in the US are within the 3 top franchise groups in the US. I mean, just the percentage of the pie that the independent properties are holding as a percentage of the whole hotel space in the US seems to be getting smaller. And then you add the technology differential between that, you know, they've got to have to work and fight pretty hard, I would guess. I know we've sort of segued a little bit, but I'd just be interested in your thoughts on that comment.
I've definitely seen a lot of transition to use the soft brands within the big brands, you know, so whether that's Autograph or Tribute, or, you know, kind of keeping that independent feel, but you leveraging the technology of the brands, their bigger, you know, their distribution platform, their loyalty platforms. So we've definitely seen a growth in those soft brands that fall under Marriott and Hilton for sure.
I'm going to, and Jack.
Yeah, just a comment. You make a great point, right? The independence, that tech stack, we call it, it's overwhelming to many true independents, right? The brands, that's all created for you, right? That's all set for you. It's there, the support, et cetera, strong infrastructure. But independents, you're creating that entire tech stack, and it can be very overwhelming, which is why, right, strongly recommend bring in the resources when you need it. The support's out there.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And if you don't have the right tech stack, right, it's just a domino effect of other issues that'll wind for years to come.
It's a bit like, I look at it almost in terms of, it's like the skeleton, isn't it? If you take your body as the analogy, you know, and the organs are the different pieces of the technology that, or maybe a better analogy is the organs and the nervous system, you know, and these things have to plug in together to make the actual body function and work. And if one of those isn't quite up to speed, then you're not going to be as efficient, as effective as you could be. But anyway, I'll leave my analogies aside. Okay, point 4 that you identified was several key benchmarks and KPIs within marketing and revenue were lacking. So if you want to pick that one up, Jack, that's an interesting point, particularly from an independent here, where maybe they're using some standard KPIs or maybe defining their own KPIs. But what did you notice?
Right. Yeah, this is a meaty topic. I think could have its own session alone. So I'll try to carve it down to just a few items. But, you know, recalibrating, expanding comp sets, it's more popular than ever now, right? Given the various impacts the pandemic's had on the industry. But even before COVID, you know, there's a lot of education and, you know, learning opportunity out there for the independents of what is the best in class benchmarks out there, what software exists, you know, even with just STAR, right? Smith Travel Research that most are very familiar with. You know, I'll give example, I want to call out 2 specific STAR reports that I find several don't know exist, or they don't regularly factor them into their strategy, which I think is an opportunity. The one is the RPM report. That's the RevPAR positioning matrix. This is one of my favorites, especially for presentations to ownership groups, senior leadership, because while it's a simple visual that plots your performance on an XY axis, for ADR and occupancy, it translates well to most audiences. And it allows you to really tell the story, right? Because your regular STAR report, it'll tell you your index, it'll tell you your ranking amongst that set, but you have no idea what's that delta amongst the properties.
Yeah, good point.
You know, say you're ranked number 3 in OCC for a month, you don't know if number 4 is right on your tail, or are they notably trailing you? And on the flip side, you don't know how far ahead number 1 and number 2 is. And it's the same with ADR. So that's one of my favorites from a STAR piece that many don't realize is out there, and it's inexpensive. I think it's like $500 a year per set. And another one, which is complementary with your star subscription, is a reverse star report request. Especially now, there's so much shuffling going on, repositioning throughout, hotel closures. But that reverse star report, it tells you who has you in their set, their first set, secondary set, and that can be very learning, right? There might be a new property come in or a repositioning property. So those are two quick star reports that aren't your typical. That can be very helpful, and there's a plethora of others. I'll give Stephanie a chance to jump in here too.
Stephanie.
Yeah, I mean, I think the star report can be a little bit deceiving from a marketing standpoint. I think there's been, there's some people that might say, that you can look at a star report and it's very hard to see, where marketing plays the biggest impact, because there's so many touch points throughout that customer journey. And then when you break it out into, how much, I personally believe that marketing, I mean, yeah, you can partner with Cvent, do some different B2B campaigns, but when it comes down to group and contract, that there isn't a lot that marketing can do. So I try to look at the channel segmentation specifically. So what is our marketing's impact on brand.com, like in the big OTAs? Because I think from a transient standpoint, that's where we have our biggest opportunity. So I like to take it a step further, look at the reports either through Demand 360 or Calibri Labs and say, are we gaining market share on our comp set in these transient channels? So there's a lot of marketers out there. They'll say, oh, I got this fantastic ROI on my Expedia travel ads campaign, but the hotel in general could be doing extremely poorly. Mm-hmm. So we need to be looking at, are we gaining market share when they're, because we may not be in a position in some markets to create demand. We're just trying to steal market share from the comp set. So are we doing that and using those, especially those forward-looking tools in Demand 360 and looking at it not only historically, which that's what STAR is, but also looking forward wise to see if we're gaining that ground and consistently outperforming the comp set on those transient channels, especially throughout the summer, until we start to see that group and BT really come back to where it was, hopefully at some point. So.
No, that makes sense. And Jack, do you have any other final points? You obviously, as you said, there's a load that you can say about this, but I have a particular question. But if there's a couple of final points you wanted to make, I'll concede the floor to you for the moment.
Yeah, D360, just this whole area of business intelligence, I find it fascinating. It's sort of a part-time job to keep up on what's the next new feature within these solutions. But D360, I wanted to call out, that they now have a comparison to 2019, since last year was pretty messy, forward looking, which is great. It's a new dashboard, but they also have the option to pull short-term rental data as well. You can add in your subscription, and in some markets, extremely valuable. And then just one other, Intel piece out there, software that I've really fallen in love with over the past several years, and it continues to improve, is OTA Insight. They've come such a far way. They're not just a rate shop solution. They've added many bells and whistles and continue with market insights. But it's just, I think overall it's awesome. And I'm a data junkie. I know Stephanie is too. I love seeing these solutions and the evolution they've made just in my time in the industry. It's just really allows everyone, I feel, to have a level playing field.
That's a good point. And I think something I wanted to ask was in around comp sets, because comp sets, I feel sometimes when I hear conversations go on about comp sets or benchmarks or KPIs, there's a lot of discussion about the evolving of these KPIs and what's the new acronym, but we all seem to revert back to type and still go back to what we always used to measure by. But one thing that I was just interested to know, specifically because of what we've gone through with the pandemic, is from your experience, how much are you seeing the sort of vacation rental, the Airbnbs being brought into the comp set evaluation? Because that would seem to be a space that, 3-4 years ago, 5 years ago, maybe, I lose track of time, Airbnb was the big threat to hotels and every article was being written about Airbnb. But I always wonder how much that is brought into looking at them as an active comp set when you have a property, and whether that's different if you are an independent property or if you're a branded property. What do you guys have a view on that?
We don't take it in consideration enough on the brand side. If anything, our comp sets are too small. I mean, if you think about, if you look at if someone's shopping on Google or Expedia, anything like that, your comp set's way larger than your, the comp set in your star report. I know that I have some owners that are active and use like Airbnb. What's the AirDNA? AirDNA?
Yeah, AirDNA.
Yeah. On my side, we have ways to go on the branded side.
And Jack, from your side on the independents, what are you seeing?
Yeah, definitely an evolution. I'm happy to see TravelClick right now have that data feed into that short-term rental space in some markets, and that is pretty new. I think they just released that a few months ago or end of last year, but a long ways to go overall. It truly is a disruptor, and it does vary by market, and it varies by property. Some properties, they truly see it really doesn't have much of an impact, but others, tremendous impact, especially now in this leisure environment and these leisure destination, more resort markets, really head to head, when you have residences and villas and so forth.
Well, that was the thing that struck me. And, when there's still a hesitation, there still will be a hesitation once we get over that, everyone rushing out because they just want to be not locked down anymore. And I know it's slightly different in the US than it has been over here in the UK and Europe, but there will still be some hesitancies, and things like the short-term rental, the residences, they bring a degree of isolation built in. So, I would be sitting there as a property owner, and I'd be wanting to find out how I can build them onto my comp set if they were a big part in my market. So it's just interesting to see what you guys were seeing. Thanks for that. Okay, point 5, interesting one. Dynamic pricing. So the hesitation to fully embrace dynamic pricing and struggle to properly price the wide range of room types. Okay, again, probably another topic that could stand all on its own. But Jack, do you want to just kind of take a lead on that one?
Sure. Yeah, I still come across, I feel too many independent, these lifestyle luxury hotels, especially resorts that have a lot of room types or different units. They're not utilizing really sophisticated dynamic pricing or a revenue management system, right? Machine learning, some technology efficiencies, and not understanding the value of that inventory that they've invested so much into. And, these are some really high value assets that literally still want to use sort of fixed pricing by season and day of week, a bit of a set it and forget it mindset. Mm-hmm. And they don't realize the value of that revenue management system. And, that's another area of just, the RMS world. I'm very happy and interested to see how much it's grown just in my time in the industry as well. Ideas, for example, has been the big dog in the independent space for years. Duetto came onto the scene 9-10 years ago. They've evolved greatly, has become a main competitor of Ideas and dominating that space. But now there's a few more new competitors coming onto the scene. Pace, Automize. I did demos with them earlier this year. It's impressive what they're coming up with. Many of the same solutions and bells and whistles that Ideas and Duetto have. But my main point is, right, with that increased competition, also there's a better fit. There's no longer, I feel, the excuse, no matter how small that independent is, that it's not worth the ROI, because there's these different solutions with different levels of services now too. It's not just, even 5-7 years ago, there's one service, you get the whole package. Now you can sort of a la carte with some of these guys. Duetto, for example, has a 3-way. Pace and Automize have some different options too. But there's a fit for pretty much any property out there today. And can't stress enough on just the efficiency, sophistication needed to really ultimately get the return on their asset and realize the potential of it.
Yeah, it's a much underutilized piece of technology, really, isn't it? And what about?
And I think, I was going to say, from the brand standpoint, obviously they all have their standardized RMS platforms. But what we find quite often when you start trying to leverage, whether it's Hilton's Grow technology or whatnot, to let the system help dictate your rate strategy, is that we have crappy data. So, and I'm sure this is a problem on the independent side. So, whether it's, whatever is happening at the front desk, from rate overrides to how they handle walk-ins or call-ins, like that whole, the training aspect that's happening at an operations level really screws up our AI and our decision making forward. So we end up doing manual, and that's what we're trying to get away from, right? Is stop all the manual. So even on the branded side, we still have those problems with just poor data, means, poor, and then the systems have just, during the pandemic, when we were having, same day pickup of 100 rooms on Fridays or Saturdays in that short booking window, the systems just couldn't, it took a while for them to learn, so to speak. So we're still doing a lot of hair on fire, especially when it came to the weekends for a lot of our hotels. And I think that one of the tools I would recommend outside of what Trevor mentioned is leveraging NOR1. So although each brand has their own RMS platforms, you can layer on NOR1 to help either when you have some premium room types that you might not be getting your, if you find yourself in a place where you're giving away all your premium room types to loyalty members and you're not getting that rate premium, you might want to look at leveraging something like NOR1, which kind of during that booking cycle forces that upgrade, and most of the brands do have that partnership. You just need to have, I wouldn't suggest it for smaller hotels, and again, you have to have those premium rate types that you're trying to get that premium ADR for.
No, it makes sense. And I think, looking at that, the fact that the two words dynamic pricing was in the statement of the fifth point, by definition, if you don't have a piece of technology, you can't really be doing dynamic pricing. It's just not really feasible. So I think there would be a number of hotels, certainly on the independent space, I would guess, unless they had some form of RMS, and I don't know what the take up is of an RMS. That'd be a separate question I'll ask you in a moment. But if they don't have an RMS, then you're not going to see any dynamic pricing going on, I would guess anyway, would you?
Some attempt it, but yeah, it's definitely not sophisticated as it should be. If I could add one more piece, Trevor, to this topic, I think a key misconception that I come across with the RMSs is sort of similar to that soft brand like Preferred I mentioned before. You don't just plug in and set it, forget it, and it does, right? There's still a lot of work to maintain and manage that system and teach it. And it does more than just pricing, right? It's doing group evaluations, helping with profitability, forecasting. There's several other layers to that system. Also the efficiency standpoint.
No, that's a good point. Okay, point 6. And this is probably one that was relevant at any point in time, but probably more relevant now in our coming out of this pandemic situation. And that is rigid hotel policies, rigid hotel policies. So who wants to take this one on? Go on, Jack.
I'll kick it off there. I think this one's a little bit shorter, and but I guess the point I want to make on this, it's so critical for hotels and resorts to understand it's not a one size fits all, right? And speaking to any deposit policies, cancellation policies, and make sure they truly work for that type of property. Could be market driven, and also the current travel environment such as COVID, right? We all know that's a constant change and restrictions out there. But in some cases, I see properties being too rigid in the deposit piece, for example, right? They're leaving money on the table for improved cash flow because they're not taking deposits, for example, on special events or a high season, and the market will bear it. Another item that can fit in this topic are the infamous resort fees, urban fees, experience fees, right? The creative labels. I can't stress enough, that could be a whole nother topic, but I've done a lot of research in these, notable experience with it and experimentation. I actually did a thesis defense on it in 2017. But the part I want to stress on this is if you have a resort, urban or experience fee, you must ensure transparency during the booking journey and reservation process and have a great value proposition. Those are the two key pieces I wanted to stress on any resort fees or urban fees, whatever they're called.
Yeah, no.
But just be cognizant. It's another, don't set it and forget it. be aware of your surroundings and be aware of the current travel conditions.
That set it and forget it seems a bit of a recurring theme through some of these points. Stephanie, how does this cross over into branded then, where surely the policies and all these things are adapted and sent down from the brand, aren't they?
I think what Jack mentioned in terms of transparency with what's going on, so that you clearly set those expectations. So nothing's worse than they show up and they think your restaurant's still open. I mean, we have to realize, yes, there's a lot of us that have been, still working or still involved with hotels for the last 12 months, but there's a lot of people that are just restarting their travel journeys that haven't gone out to hotels. So their expectations may not be aligned with what they saw pre-pandemic. So communicating what's going on at the hotel, if there's any limitations to your pool still, anything like that, you want to make sure you get in front of them so that you're not dealing with bad reviews once they come on site. So even within the brand ecosphere, there's different communication methods and alerts that you can build out on different channels. And I'd also say, even with expediabooking.com, you can set up templated pre-state emails that communicate exactly what's going on. You can't do the set it and forget it, because as your hours of operations change, your, whatever your F&B offerings are, making sure that you pre-communicate that not only to your, on your own website, but also through your third-party partners as well, so that you are setting those proper expectations prior to arrival.
No, that's a good point. And as you say, I mean, it is a shorter, maybe a smaller topic, and there's some key focal points, but you get that wrong. And your point there, Stephanie, about reviews, if just simply communicating something upfront, being transparent, having the correct information, stops someone turning up with a level of expectation that is then under-delivered and then leads to a bad review. It's just a ridiculous knock-on effect that could be easily addressed. Okay, perfect. And the final one, and this is like a personal bugbear, and it drives me absolutely bonkers, particularly when we read and hear so much about the whole, direct booking, drive your direct booking strategy. And yet here we are, point 7, an outdated website and booking engine. I mean, for goodness sake, surely these are like the first things you have to get done before anything else, or maybe it's just my simplistic view. Go on, Jack, take us off on this one from an independent point of view.
Sure, I'll hit on a couple areas. This is it's definitely a meaty one. I think it could be a whole separate segment. But technology, right? Go back to the technology piece, right? It's definitely changed the way travelers book. Going to continue to do so. And we all have smartphones. We live on them today, and it's become the norm. And it's not just for researching and discovery like it was in the earlier days, right? Many were concerned or weren't comfortable booking online once you got into that booking engine, or it wasn't a smooth process, but that's changed as well. So it's very important to ensure you're booking transactions through your mobile, right? It's a smooth and easy process. But your website, starting back really the development piece, it should be built with mobile first in mind.
Yeah.
Because of that point, right? It needs to be device responsive, fast, no long pauses for a certain image or a certain video to upload, or people are going to drop off or become frustrated. Right? And there's a lot of design features now within mobile available to streamline that booking journey and ultimately achieve the number one goal, right? Which is we want that transaction, we want that reservation or the RFP to come through in the group side, or a restaurant reservation, whatever that transaction may be. So one of the first things I do with any new client in an audit and going through the website piece is I view it on my phone. Every single page, I time it. And besides the mobile first website, the other area I dig into obviously is the booking engine that I mentioned on this topic. And what's that booking journey like? Is it easy? How many clicks did I need to make? Are room and suite types presented and categorized properly, or am I scrolling and scrolling? Or as I mentioned before, I have a lot of properties, at least 15, 20 some room types, and these luxury properties. So you really have to be smart in how you package that up and present it. And you can go on to offers. Are there too many offers that are really cannibalizing one another? Or is it a confusing selection process? Or maybe there aren't enough offers. And something else I want to mention, FAQ page is another great addition to a website. If you don't already have it, it also helps with your SEO. Many guests find it very helpful for quick answers and efficiencies. I know I personally always look for it at a property when I'm traveling. And one last one, I promise I'll wrap on this one, but it's because it's been so popular, and I actually went through it with a client last year, and primarily for the independents out there, because we know the big brands are all over this, is ADA compliance. There's been a surge of lawsuits over the past year or so. So connect with your website partner, right? Ensure you're in compliance across all the various areas required. There's typically always little things changing here and there. But wanted to mention the ADA piece on the website side, outside of just the booking engine, the experience, and mobile first.
Yeah, good point. And Stephanie, from a branded point of view?
Yeah, it's a good point on the ADA compliance, because we've, had problems with either restaurant websites, freestanding ones, but the big topic I'm learning about now is how to make your PDF, so like your menus, your meeting specs thing, how to make those ADA accessible as well, even outside of your website. So that's kind of something new. And then even on the independent side, I just had to add, like, from a speed standpoint, like the speed component is huge. So looking at, Google just rolled out from Search Console their core web vitals. So being able to look at, Google tell you between mobile and desktop, you can kind of basically compare where your slower sites, where your slower pages are, and be able to, so I'm curious to see if that's kind of part of the ranking algorithm moving forward. But I think the other component that I want to focus on, I feel like you can have the best website in the world, you can have the best booking engine in the world, but the reviews component across your channels is just really huge. We've seen a lot of hotels struggle in that space due to the pandemic, either due to, like I said, the poor communication standpoint, short staff that, didn't set expectations properly. There's a lot of different reasons for that, but I really have to heavily emphasize how much you can have the best SEO in the world, and if your reviews are poor, you're going to have a disconnect with that conversion rate, and you're going to have people, you may be getting the ads, but in the end, you may not see the conversion rate. So really focusing on that component is still pretty important.
Yeah, good points. And I think what's interesting is, and this, it's fascinating how many discussions we have our side and website, even if not down to the booking engine part, but just the discussion around the website. But I think I almost look at the two things as one. As a mainly leisure traveler, when we talk about competing, going direct. Well, if we're an independent, we're competing with branded properties, and we're competing with OTAs. To simplify this, if the process of making a booking is more complicated than either of those two, there's the moment there's friction, someone's off. Why, if we know that driving direct is what we want to do, and we know that the website is our shop window and the first way that people will engage with us, and then to have that, maybe the booking engine piece separately, let's focus on the website at the moment. Why do we still see these clunky, outdated, just feeling really old, forgetting even just mobile first, just right? The site just doesn't feel modern anyway. What do we think the resistance is on those parts?
It's a great question. In my experience, and like I said, I've definitely had multiple, in my consulting time, very small, individual owners, families typically, or a small group. I think the most common scenario, it's really education, Trevor, and getting them to understand the value proposition. I say, okay, well, to go do this full installation of a new CRS, or let's go create this, custom website. Yeah, it's going to cost $25,000. Just throw an estimate out there, all in. And then once they quantify, well, here's the impact short term and long term. And that's really where it's, it can be a lot of work, and at times it can be frustrating. It's like, it's convincing them, it's mapping it out, being persuasive, but it's so rewarding to get them to understand and to modernize their business, basically, right? Because it goes across the whole spectrum, from the website, booking engine, their software, business intelligence that's out there. But it's really, I think the easiest way is it's going back to education and getting them to understand technology is driving everything to change, and their property is not an exception.
And Stephanie, from your point on the branded side, is there some correlation in there?
I mean, I guess I have my own, you can kind of see which brands are taking opportunities, building out FAQ pages, like Jack mentioned, building out, leveraging schema and some of those other components. But a lot of that is, again, just going back and leveraging the tools. It's kind of leveraging the tools that are out there. I mean, there's different, each CMS has their own capabilities. And I just found that hotels go back to that set it and forget it. They build the content once, they don't build any extra offers. I asked when I first started working with the hotel, so when was the last time you read your website?
Yeah.
When was the last time you even looked at it from a guest experience? The only time they look at it is when they get a guest complaint and they said, oh, your website said this, and it's, and that's when they go and try to find the error. That's the only time they ever look at it.
Yeah, no, I think it's a good point.
Yeah.
I think your point as well, Jack, there is around costs. I think there's a large perception that people think that, there's a huge cost to getting a website built. They can be expensive, but they don't have to be tens of thousands of pounds. There are a lot of providers out there nowadays that have, a website framework that can already be overlaid with content. They have a booking engine that you can interlace with that as well. There are providers out there that can do these things at a much more cost-effective approach, even if it's like just a stepping stone, really, isn't it?
As long as you're ready to give up some functionality and customization. Then
but I think sometimes it's looking at it and thinking, well, either we stay as we are, or maybe we take a step, and then there could be a smaller investment to get you ready. But then, at least back to your point, Jack, you can look and say, oh, well, I'm missing this, I'm missing this, I'm missing this. But now you've identified what you need, and you can build a business case as to why it might be worth that extra level of sophistication. But at least update your site, at least look at it, at least bring it into the modern age, at least make it mobile first, at least have a decent booking engine as a stepping stone, and then move it forward. But as I said before we started this one, this is my biggest bugbear, so I'll move on from there. I'm very conscious of your time. I'm sure you guys have got other things that you need to dive into now, but that was, from my point of view, highly informative. I'm really glad we were able to get you on. Really glad you were able to put that case study together that enabled us to have this conversation. And thanks so much for sharing so much knowledge, so many insights, so many good tips. Thanks again for your time, guys. It's much appreciated.
Thank you, Trevor.
Take care.
Bye.
Well, I hope that conversation was of interest. And thanks again to Stephanie and Jack for joining us. I guess the discussion prompts some thoughts or questions. I mean, do any of these 7 commercial mistakes resonate with you? And when some of these points feel like basic requirements, why are they still being overlooked? And could it be said that hotels are guilty of a set it and leave it mindset? If you have any thoughts on these points, please do feel free to comment below. We always value your input. And if you like the discussion, please don't forget to give a thumbs up. It helps in 2 ways. One, it lets us know that you actually like what we're producing. And also, by giving a thumbs up or subscribing, you help raise the profile of this channel. And in that way, you're helping us to help others. If you're interested in more of our expert insights, here is our playlist. And please don't forget to subscribe. Here is the button. Thanks again for watching.